the big picture window to back where the meditation garden is. And he would sit there for hours and just stare at the meditation garden.
January 1979. Vernon Presley sat at his desk with his feet propped up, staring out the window at his son's grave, and said words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "I can't believe these sons of bitches are up walking around and my baby's laying out there in the ground." I'm Donna Presley, and what I'm about to tell you isn't something I heard from a friend of a friend or read in a tabloid or pieced together from internet rumors. This came directly from Vernon Presley's mouth to my ears. My uncle, Elvis's father, the man who knew his son better than anyone on this earth. And he told me Elvis was murdered. Let me take you back to that office. January 1979. I'd started working for Uncle Vernon just months after Elvis died. My desk was right next to his at Graceland. Every single day he'd come in, sit down, put those feet up on his desk and lean back in his chair. And from where he sat, he had a perfect, unobstructed view through that big picture window straight to the meditation garden where Elvis was buried. Hours, he would sit there for hours just staring at that grave. Not working, not talking, just staring. And the look on his face wasn't just grief, it was something darker, something that aided him with every breath he took. Now I'd always loved and respected Uncle Vernon. He could be firm, even stern at times, and honestly, he intimidated me a little when I was younger. But working alongside him day after day, we developed a different kind of relationship. We weren't just niece and uncle anymore. We were adults, equals, confidants. And I'll be forever grateful for that time we had together because what he told me changed everything I thought I knew about August 16, 1977. We were sitting there one afternoon, and out of nowhere he said it. Those words about sons of bitches walking around while his baby was in the ground. And at first, I thought it was just a grieving father talking. You have to understand, Vernon had already lost one son. Jesse Garin, Elvis's twin, stillborn, he'd carried that loss his entire life. And now his only living child, his superstar son, the boy he'd protected and provided for and walked alongside through everything, gone at 42 years old. So when he said those words, I tried to comfort him. I said something like, "I know, Uncle Vernon, it's awful, it's so sad." Just trying to acknowledge his pain, you know. And he turned to me and said, "No, Donna, you're not hearing me." I stopped. "Well, no, sir, I guess I'm not." And that's when he said it clearly, directly, looking right at me. I believe there was foul play involved in Elvis's murder. Murder, not death, murder. I felt my stomach drop. "What?" "Yes," he said, no hesitation, no doubt in his voice. My hands were shaking. "Do you know who did it?" He leaned back in that chair, still staring out at the meditation garden, and said, "I have my suspicions." Suspicions, which meant he'd been thinking about this, analyzing it, putting pieces together. This wasn't some wild grief talking. Vernon Presley was one of the most observant, intelligent men I've ever known. He noticed details other people missed. He paid attention to things that seemed insignificant to everyone else but meant everything when you put them together. And he'd walked every single day of his life alongside Elvis. Yes, Elvis was a grown man, a superstar, an icon, a legend known around the entire world. But to Vernon, he was still just his baby, his son, the boy he'd do anything to protect. And now that boy was dead. And Vernon didn't believe it was natural. He didn't believe it was an accident. He didn't believe it was just the cumulative effect of Elvis's health problems, even though Elvis had plenty of them toward the end. Vernon believed someone took his son from him, deliberately, intentionally. And that person was still out there, walking around free while Elvis lay cold in the ground. I grabbed the phone on my desk. My instinct was immediate. "Then let's call the police. Let's tell them what you suspect. Let them investigate." "Put the phone down." His voice was firm, commanding, the kind of voice that made you obey without question. "Sir, but if you think..." "Put the phone down, Donna." I put it down. He looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. Determined, resolute, almost frighteningly calm. "I will handle this the way Elvis would have wanted me to, in-house, so put the phone down." In-house, those two words told me everything. This wasn't going to the authorities. This wasn't filing reports or waiting for some investigation that might go nowhere. This was something else entirely, something darker, something final. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding. "Uncle Vernon, explain all this to me. Tell me what you know." He shook his head. No, I've told you too much already, and I don't want you involved because I want you protected. I don't want anybody else involved in this. Protected from what? From who? The implication was terrifying. If I knew too much, I'd be in danger. If I pushed too hard, something could happen to me too. And if someone had got to Elvis Presley, the most famous, most protected man in the world, they could get to anyone. Vernon Presley sat in that office every day until he died, staring at his son's grave, knowing in his heart that Elvis had been murdered, and carrying the weight of suspicions he couldn't prove, names he couldn't say out loud, evidence he couldn't bring to court. But he knew, and now so did I. My hand was still on that phone. Every instinct in my body was screaming to pick it back up, to dial the police, to get someone official involved in what Vernon had just told me. But he'd made himself clear. Put the phone down. Handle it in-house. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. Do you remember when Elvis was threatened? Of course I remembered. Everyone in the family remembered. There had been a credible death threat against Elvis. Serious enough that the FBI got involved. Serious enough that Elvis had to consider the very real possibility that someone might actually try to shoot him on stage in front of thousands of people. Yes, sir, I remember. Vernon nodded slowly. Elvis told all the guys who worked for him, all his security, everyone close to him, if he gets me, you get him. Because Elvis said he didn't want anyone in this world walking around becoming famous for killing Elvis Presley. Let that sink in for a moment. Elvis's own philosophy wasn't about justice through the legal system. It wasn't about arrests and trials and prison sentences. It was about immediate final retaliation. If someone takes me out, you take them out. No courts, no lawyers, no second chances. And now Vernon was telling me he wanted to handle his son's murder the same way. The way Elvis would have wanted. I sat there stunned, trying to process what this meant. Vernon suspected someone, he believed he knew who killed Elvis, and he was planning to handle it outside the law, in-house, the Presley way. Are you sure, Uncle Vernon? My voice was barely a whisper. Yes, absolute certainty, no wavering. Now don't say anything to anybody about this, because I've already said too much. Okay. What else could I say? This was Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, a man who just lost everything that mattered to him. And he was telling me to stay quiet, stay safe, and let him do what needed to be done. So we went back to work, or at least we tried to, but I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't think about anything except what he just told me. And Vernon sat there, same as always, staring out that window at Elvis's grave. Every breath he took looked painful, like he was drowning in grief and rage and the unbearable knowledge that someone had taken his son from him. When lunchtime came, I walked back to my mom's trailer behind the main house. My parents lived on the Graceland grounds. They'd been there since 1969, stayed through everything, even after they opened the estate to the public. And I needed to talk to my mother. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. I walked in and said, "Mom, Uncle Vernon told me something today." She looked up. "What's that, honey?" He said he believes there was foul play involved in Elvis's death. He thinks it was murder, and I wanted to call the police, but he wouldn't let me. I expected shock. I expected disbelief. I expected her to tell me I must have misunderstood him. Instead, she said two words, "Leave it alone." I stared at her. What? Leave it alone, Donna. Forget about it. Let Vernon handle it. He'll take care of it, but you stay away from it. My mother wasn't surprised. She wasn't confused. She already knew. Or at least she knew Vernon believed it, and she was telling me to back off immediately. Then she said something that made my skin crawl. If they can get to Elvis, they can get to anybody. They, not some random person, not a stranger. They, multiple people maybe. Or one person with enough power and access to reach the most protected man in America. You have two small children, my mother continued. Her voice was firm, almost harsh. Leave it alone. I don't want to hear any more about it. So I promised her. I promised I would stay out of it, that I wouldn't ask questions, that I wouldn't go digging for answers, because she was right. I had Bobby's at home, and if someone could get to Elvis Presley inside his own bedroom at Graceland, surrounded by security and family and people who loved him, then nobody was safe. That afternoon, I went back to work, tried to answer fan mail, tried to act normal, tried to pretend my entire understanding of Elvis's death hadn't just been shattered in the span of one conversation. And then I went into the main house. I went to Grandma Minnie-Me's room, Elvis's grandmother, Vernon's mother. I knelt down beside her chair like I always did, and I told her what Uncle Vernon had said. She looked at me with those wise, ancient eyes and said, "I know, honey." She knew, of course she knew. "I want you to leave it alone. Let Vernon handle it, he'll take care of it." 3 family members, 3 conversations, 3 identical responses. Leave it alone. Let Vernon handle it. Stay out of it for your own safety. This wasn't just Vernon's belief. This was a family secret. A collective knowledge that something terrible had happened to Elvis, something beyond a heart attack or an accidental overdose or whatever the official story was. And the entire Presley family had made a silent, unanimous decision to let Vernon deal with it his way. Because they all understood what his way meant. They all remembered Elvis's words, "If he gets me, you get him." The Presley family believed Elvis was murdered, and they believed the killer was someone close, someone still at Graceland, someone still walking around free, pretending to grieve, attending the funeral, offering condolences. Someone who thought they'd gotten away with it. And Vernon Presley was watching, waiting, investigating, building his case, planning his move. In-house, the way Elvis would have wanted. So what did Vernon actually do after that conversation? Did he just sit in his office and stare at Elvis's grave and do nothing? Absolutely not. Vernon Presley was a man of action, and when he told me he had suspicions, he wasn't speculating. He was investigating. Vernon didn't trust the official story. He didn't believe the narrative that was being sold to the public. And he sure as hell wasn't going to sit back and let whoever killed his son walk away free. So he started digging. Quietly, privately, without fanfare or announcements or police involvement. He started with Ginger Alden, Elvis's girlfriend, the woman who found him, the last person to see him alive. Now I want to be clear here, I'm not saying Ginger was involved. I'm not accusing her of anything, but Vernon questioned her. And we know this because years later, Ginger wrote about it in her own book. She confirmed that Vernon interrogated her about what happened that day, what she saw, what she heard, the timeline, the details, everything. Because Vernon was smart, observant, the kind of man who noticed things other people missed. He'd walked alongside Elvis every single day of his life. He knew his son's habits, his patterns, his routines. He knew who Elvis trusted, who he was wary of, who had access to him, who had motives. And something didn't add up. Think about the timing. In the months before Elvis died, he was talking about making major changes. Big changes. Changes to his workspace and his home space, as Vernon described it to me. Elvis was planning to shake things up in ways he'd never done before, and Vernon said Elvis was more adamant about these changes than he'd ever been about anything. So what does that mean? Was Elvis planning to fire people, cut people off financially, people who'd been on his payroll for years, living off his generosity? Was he planning to change his will, remove people who thought they were set for life? Was he planning to expose secrets, confront someone about theft or betrayal or something worse? Vernon believed someone knew about these planned changes, and that someone was terrified of what would happen when Elvis acted, terrified enough to make sure Elvis never got the chance. Think about it. If you're living off Elvis Presley's money and suddenly he's about to cut you off, you lose everything. If you're in his inner circle and he's about to expose you for something, your reputation is destroyed. If you're named in his will and he's about to change it, your future disappears. How far would someone go to prevent that from happening? Vernon was asking those exact questions, and he was watching everyone around him with new eyes. Everyone who'd been at Graceland that day, everyone who had access to Elvis's bedroom, everyone who stood to gain or lose based on the timing of his death. And Vernon found something, or at least he believed he found something. Because here's the thing that most people don't know, and this is absolutely crucial to understanding this entire story. Vernon sealed documents, official papers related to Elvis's death, and he ordered them sealed for 50 years after Elvis passed away. 50 years, that means they'll be available in 2027, less than 2 years from now. Why would Vernon Presley seal documents for half a century? What could possibly be in those papers that needed to be hidden for 50 years? Family secrets, financial information, medical records. Or evidence, names, proof of what happened, details of what Vernon discovered during his private investigation. Because here's the tragedy at the heart of this entire story. You can know something is absolutely true. You can have evidence. You can have suspicions based on facts and timelines and witness statements and behavior patterns. But if you can't prove it in a court of law beyond a reasonable doubt, you can't do anything with that information. And maybe Vernon found exactly that. Maybe he figured out who killed Elvis. Maybe he knew their motive. Maybe he even understood how they did it. But he couldn't prove it, not in a way that would hold up legally, not in a way that would get a conviction. So what do you do with that knowledge? You carry it. You seal it away for a future generation to judge. And maybe, if you're Vernon Presley, you handle it the way your son would have wanted, in-house. But here's the devastating reality. Vernon died in June of 1979, less than 2 years after Elvis. His heart gave out. Or maybe it was just broken beyond repair. Maybe carrying that knowledge, that rage, that helplessness destroyed him from the inside out. He died knowing the truth but unable to act on it. Or maybe he did act on it, and we'll never know what he arranged, what conversations happened, what deals were made behind closed doors at Graceland. All we know for certain is that Vernon Presley walked every day with the absolute conviction that someone murdered his son. He investigated. He questioned people. He sealed documents that won't be opened until 2027, and he took whatever he knew to his grave just 23 months after Elvis died. Every breath he took in those final months was torture. Every day staring at that grave, knowing his baby didn't die naturally, knowing someone took him away deliberately, and being powerless to get justice through the legal system. Can you imagine that? Being a father who knows your son was murdered and not being able to prove it, not being able to stand in court and point at the person responsible and watch them pay for what they did. That's what Vernon Presley lived with. That's what killed him, not just grief, but the unbearable weight of knowledge he couldn't use. And in 2 years, those sealed documents open. Will they contain the answers? Will Vernon's voice reach out from beyond the grave and finally name names? Will we learn what he discovered during his investigation? Or will the truth die with him, locked away forever in suspicions and sealed papers and family secrets? Section 4. Why Donna finally spoke and what happens next. So why am I telling you this now? Why, after keeping this secret for over 40 years, am I finally speaking out about what Vernon told me that day in his office? Because I made a promise, to Vernon, to my mother, to my grandmother. I promised I would leave it alone, stay out of it, keep my mouth shut, and let Vernon handle it his way. And I kept that promise. For decades, I kept it. I went back to my life, raised my children, tried to process what I knew while living with the weight of that knowledge pressing down on me every single day. Because once you know something like that, you can't unknow it. You can't pretend you never had that conversation. You can't unhear those words. I believe there was foul play involved in Elvis's murder. For years, I stayed silent, completely silent. I didn't talk about it with friends. I didn't share it in interviews. I didn't post about it online or hint at it in conversations. I honored the family's wishes and protected myself and my children just like my mother told me to do. But then in 1997, I co-wrote a book called Elvis, Precious Memories. And in that book, I alluded to Vernon's suspicions. I didn't lay out the whole story. I didn't give you the detailed account I'm giving you right now. But I mentioned that Vernon had doubts about how Elvis died, that he believed something wasn't right, that he had suspicions about foul play. And immediately, someone came forward and told me that Vernon had recanted his words, that he'd taken it back, that he'd changed his mind and decided Elvis's death was natural after all. And I said, no, he didn't. Because he didn't. Vernon never recanted anything to me, not once, not ever. And if he had changed his mind, if he decided his suspicions were wrong, he would have told me. We worked together every single day until he died. We sat in that office together. We talked. We had that kind of relationship where he would have come to me and said, Donna, remember what I told you? I was wrong. I was just grieving. Forget what I said. But he never did that, not once. He died believing exactly what he told me in that conversation. Elvis was murdered. He had his suspicions about who did it, and he was handling it his way. So when someone tried to tell me Vernon recanted, I knew it was a lie. Someone trying to cover up the truth. Someone trying to rewrite history and make Vernon's suspicions disappear. And I pushed back, but I still didn't tell the full story. I still honored the family agreement to keep the details quiet. But now it's 2024, heading into 25, and this topic has come back up. Other people are talking about it. Researchers are asking questions. Fans are discussing theories online, and I'm watching people speculate and guess and create narratives based on fragments and rumors. And I realized something. I'm the only person left who heard these words directly from Vernon Presley's mouth. I was there. I was in that office. I had that conversation with him, and then with my mother, and then with my grandmother. This isn't second-hand information. This isn't something I heard from a family member who heard it from someone else. This is first-hand testimony. And if I don't tell this story now, accurately and completely, then it dies with me. And Vernon's voice gets silenced forever. His beliefs get dismissed as rumors or grief or conspiracy theories. And the truth he tried to uncover gets buried along with him and Elvis. So I'm speaking now. I'm giving you the full account of what happened. What Vernon said, how the family reacted, what he believed and why he believed it. And here's something else that's changed. The person or persons that Vernon suspected, they've passed away. They're dead now, which means I can speak more freely without putting anyone in danger, without worrying about retaliation or threats or someone coming after me or my family the way my mother feared back in '79. If they can get to Elvis, they can get to anybody. That's what she told me. But now, whoever they were, they're gone. Time has done what Vernon couldn't do through the legal system. Those people faced their own judgment, whether in this life or the next. But here's what keeps me up at night. Here's what I think about constantly as we get closer to 2027. Those sealed documents, the papers Vernon locked away for 50 years. In less than 2 years, they'll be opened. They'll be available for researchers, for historians, for Elvis fans, for anyone who wants to know the truth about what Vernon discovered. Will they contain names? Will Vernon have written down exactly who he suspected and why? Will there be evidence he couldn't use in court but preserved for history? Will we finally learn what changes Elvis was planning to make that might have gotten him killed? Or will those documents be disappointing? Just financial records or medical information or family matters that have nothing to do with the suspicions Vernon shared with me. I don't know, I honestly don't know what's in those sealed papers. Vernon never told me, and I never asked because he'd already made it clear he'd told me too much. But I do know this. Vernon Presley believed his son was murdered. He told me directly. The family confirmed they knew about his beliefs, and he spent the last 2 years of his life investigating, questioning, and searching for answers he may or may not have found. That's not speculation. That's not internet conspiracy theory. That's not tabloid gossip. That's the truth spoken directly from Vernon to me and now from me to you. And in 2 years, we might finally learn what Vernon knew. Or we might be left with the same questions, the same suspicions, and the same heartbreaking mystery that haunted him until the day he died. Thank you for listening to this story. I know it's difficult and shocking, but it needed to be told. Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. What do you think is in those sealed documents? Subscribe to this channel because when 2027 comes and those papers are released, we'll cover it together. The truth doesn't die, it just waits for the right moment.